Good. So welcome everyone. Already the second session after lunch, which is always nice because then it means that you're all enthusiastic and awake again. Thank you, Saka, by the way, for helping them get awake. The talk is going to be the ups and downs of bootstrapping a software as a service and surviving 6 years of Azure at the same time. Now, before I start, I again want to thank Saka and everyone organizing IglooConf for making this happen. I also enjoy watching Saka present because it kind of looks like this, an old man.
That's funny.
So right, this talk is going to be about the story that I and a colleague of mine experienced during the past couple of years. So basically in 2011 we started writing some code because it was something that was interesting to us, which eventually became a company, which eventually became a service that the entire Microsoft.NET Core team has been building .NET Core 1.0 on top, and up till the end where we actually sold the company last summer to our acquirer. So if you don't know me, I'm Maarten Balliauw. I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains. By the way, during this entire story, I've been doing a full job at JetBrains. I've been at Microsoft as well at the same time. So next to this MyGet story, we've also had our day-to-day jobs. I founded MyGet together with Xavier, my colleague then. I also run the Azure user group in Belgium, so if you're interested to come to Belgium, because we have nice summers even during winter, you can go there and join us for a session there as well. Right, so MyGet, in case you don't know about this product, it's a software as a service product where you can just go and create public and private NuGet, NPM, Maven, Bower, and whatnot feeds that you can use in your team. So if you have an internal framework, you can componentize it, make it into a NuGet package or an NPM package, and then upload it to your private feeds, and then have your entire team or your entire organization make use of that package that you uploaded there. It's built in .NET, it runs on top of Azure, and like I mentioned before, we bootstrapped this all the way. So we've had full-time jobs during the time that we were doing this thing. Although eventually being a consultant and having the option to invoice either the person paying you for your day-to-day job or invoicing your own company. So it kind of helps to have that flexibility during that time. But generally, we did this in the evening hours and after it. So MyGet looks like this right now. But before we dive into that part, let's give you a little bit of history on how we built MyGet and when it happened. So 2011, I don't know who was writing code back then and doing stuff in .NET, but a lot of the things that are available today in the .NET ecosystem are things that came about in 2011. For example, Azure was released somewhere in 2008 or 2009 at PDC. 2011 was actually the first year where some people actually started using that thing, beyond just proof of concepts and experimenting a little bit with it. At the same time, Microsoft experienced quite some pressure on the .NET ecosystem and on Azure, because Azure only ran .NET. There was no PHP, no NPM, no Node, no Java, no whatever. And they felt like a lot of people were building apps in, for example, Node and doing JavaScript and wanted to do that. So Microsoft thought, being Microsoft, let's make .NET easier and build some products that make it better on our own platform to do things. So there was Silverlight. We all know what happened to Silverlight, but again, it was something that they brought out to bring a competitor to Flash. The Windows Phone was going to rule the world. Who had a Windows Phone? Who has a Windows Phone? Awesome. How do you install apps even? If you find apps even. But anyway, WebMatrix was there as well. I don't know if you saw WebMatrix back in the days. It was the predecessor to VS Code, I think, written in .NET, I think, and it was actually pretty good. It allowed you to do PHP, .NET, and a couple of other things, but I don't know what happened to WebMatrix, but it's no longer around. And NuPack happened. NuPack was the first name for the NuGet project, which basically sparked what we have been doing. 2011 was not only awesome because a lot of the things that we see today started originating in that year. It was also awesome because that year the portal went from this one. Anyone remember this one? Anyone deployed into that thing? You know the saying, when the box is blue, a bill is due, and when it's gray, it's okay, and you're not going to get built. Well, that one was active then. So Silverlight came about, and Microsoft replaced it with the Silverlight portal, which was awesome. And if you look at the status bar down there, you will even see that it was very real-time in applying your updates and stuff that you were doing in the portal, because it would refresh every 30 seconds. Like, awesome. Not only this was awesome, it was also an awesome year, because that year I think I met Brady. And Brady looked like this back in the days, and he was doing lots of webcams and so on. Also, coincidentally, I don't know, that was also the year when these movies came about. So yeah. So also in 2011, I was speaking and ramping up the speaking and doing more of those things, blogging about a lot of things. My colleague Xavier was doing a lot of application lifecycle management, because TFS just came about, and work items and tracking and all those things that were related to that were interesting. And we were blogging about those things, presenting about those things and so on. And I was fiddling around with, and you can still find this post on my blog, with dynamic WCF service routing. Basically, the idea would be that you define a route. The route could contain a variable, and you would pass that variable into your WCF service, so you could serve something specific for a certain customer, for example. So basically, multi-tenant WCF, so to speak. That year, a week after, or even a week before, I was presenting at Tech Days in Belgium about cost architecting on Azure, I think, and something with Silverlight as well. I'm really happy I spent so much time doing Silverlight in those days. But I got talking with my colleague Xavier, and he was like, yeah, this blog post was kind of cool. I didn't know that you could actually plug this modern new routing thing on top of this WCF, which has been there for a while. And we were sort of bouncing off ideas on this NuGet thing that just happened, and the fact that we were interested in how it worked, how you could install packages, how the feeds worked, and so on. And we discovered that that thing was built on top of WCF OData. So we thought, okay, NuGet.org is just public feeds, nothing but that. And we could imagine us building our own internal framework and wanting to distribute it among our team, but not towards everyone on the internet, because NuGet.org was public for everyone to consume. So we started thinking, okay, maybe we can create something that leverages this WCF service routing with something that hosts NuGet packages. And that's when MyGet was born as a proof of concept application. I think this first version only allowed you to favorite certain packages from NuGet.org, which you could then distribute in your team, like the list of approved packages that people could use. But still, people started using this, and people were happy to use this, and so on. And a friend of ours said, I would pay for this thing. I would pay for this thing, and I would really want to use this professionally, because I think there's value in doing that. So we thought, okay, if some guy wants to pay for this, there's probably more people who want to pay for this. So we thought, okay, let's do a survey and ask some very intelligent questions on what our project should look like and what we should shape it like, and so on. So we were mainly interested in, should we do something that you self-host in your own data center, or build a software as a service? What pricing model should we be doing? Do we do a freemium and then you pay for additional packages on top of that? Or do we go full paid all the way, or how do we do this thing? And how much money would people give for a service like this? Turned out that our very scientific survey that we held got 36 responses. And of those 36, 80% would want to pay for an enterprise plan, which was awesome. We thought, yes, there's 80% of those 36 that want to pay us. We're going to get rich. Only 60% of them, though, wanted to pay for that enterprise plan, which is kind of weird, but still, it happened. And 75% of people told us we don't want to do software as a service because cloud is evil. Back in 2011, cloud was still not as accepted as it is today. So 75% wanted to have something that they could host themselves. So we set out, we looked at the Microsoft marketing at that point, and they were all like, you get a cloud, you get a cloud, you get a cloud, you should start a startup, you should start a startup, you should start a startup. So that's what we did. We built a software as a service product. So we released that thing, and we started billing for that thing. People would start coming in, and so on. Now, the thing is, we held that survey somewhere in 2011, And this thing is March 2012. So March 2012, 8 months after the survey that you held, what the hell? Well, we thought, okay, we have this proof of concept, this minimum viable thing, and people want to pay for this. But if we want more people to pay for this, we need to build more features, because features is what sells your product, right? So we built more features. But being developers, we thought, okay, if nobody's using our code, we don't know if it's good code and if it actually works and what the feature should look like. So while we are thinking about this billing part, during those 8 months, we'll ship all those features for free to everyone so that they can use them. And then at the moment we built the subscription thing, we thought, okay, we cannot revert that, and we should, well, we gave it to them anyway, so let's give it for free as well. We added subscriptions, and the subscriptions did not add more features because all the features would be the same, except that in subscriptions you would get private feeds, whereas if you didn't pay us, you would get public feeds, and you would pay for additional storage and the number of contributors on a feed. Pretty much the GitHub model there. We also had no idea how to do billing and recurring billing, and we thought PayPal looks nice, so we built our subscription model around PayPal, and I'm saying subscription model, but subscription model in the end was just us sending a reminder email every month to every single customer that we had with a link to PayPal. Can you please go there and re-swipe your credit card and pay us? So very, very professional at the time. In 2013, we were still doing PayPal to our personal accounts. There's some legislation in Belgium that you can do some revenue without starting a company, but that revenue began to grow, and we were actually, looking back, very surprised that people would actually read that email every month and go and pay us every month, which is, I wouldn't do that, but back then it seemed to work. But the revenue kept growing, so we decided, okay, we have to start a company, but we're still not sure that we actually want to build a company and so on. So we did a company in the UK. In Belgium, you pay 20,000 euros or 18,000 euros to start a proper company. In the UK, you go to a website, you pay 250 euros, and 4 hours later, there's your company. So that's what we did. We kind of set it up for failure because we didn't even know that we were going to keep doing this and so on. So cheap as limited in the UK was what we did. We kept building features. We kept using our own network to do the marketing and so on. And yeah, the thing kept growing, revenue kept coming and so on. At some point, we got an email from a company in the UK as well, and they wanted to invest in us. They were like, okay, these guys are onto something, we want to invest in you guys. So we had a good chat. I think we had some really nice steak that they paid for, which was even better. And after that meeting, they came with a proposal to give us 100,000 euros for 40% of equity in the company. Now, at that point, we were still deciding, do we actually want to do this thing? And also at this stage, do we want to give away 40% of the company for this amount of money? So we were thinking about that, and we decided to keep bootstrapping in the end. And over the years, we've been jokingly saying to one another that eventually in life, you have to say no to 100,000 euros. That's what we did. In 2014, something really interesting happens, new European legislation that the VAT rules when selling goods online would be changing. I don't know if you know this one, and if you buy ebooks or other digital services, you will probably have seen that the fees have changed a little bit. The idea is that it used to be that you would pay as a customer the VAT rate of the country where the company that you were purchasing from existed, and that legislation changed to the VAT rate of the customer's country. So in Finland, you would pay Finnish VAT, in Belgium, you would pay Belgian VAT, etc., etc. Now we thought, okay, we're just two people doing this thing after hours. We don't want to occupy ourselves with figuring out which VAT rule applies where, and yeah, filing all that administration with all the different EU countries. So we looked around and we discovered fastspring.com, where you could do actual subscriptions, so a huge step up from the PayPal system that we had before, emailing, basically begging our customers for money every month. So they had real subscriptions, and they would handle this VAT mess that we nicknamed this legislation as well. We were a little bit concerned that people moving from, hey, here's an email and please pay us every month, to a real subscription would cost us customers. But in fact, it didn't cost us customers. People were really happy because they no longer had to swipe their card every month to get our service. So that's really good. At this time, we also introduced the enterprise plan, where you could use basically your own full MyGet to work with the entire application as if it were your own dedicated MyGet tenants that you could use. Now, 2014 till 2018, well, we kept building features, we kept growing, both in terms of customers as well as in size of feeds, size of packages, and so on. In 2018, we got acquired and sold the company, but I'll no longer bore you with the business details of this thing, and for now, continue with some more technical things. But before we do that, I quickly want to highlight that during 2014 until 2018, the portal had another 2 iterations. We went from the Silverlight portal with a 30-second refresh to this nice single-page application. I think everyone has probably been using this one. It's not that old yet. Which was a really nice portal. And then, so this was the new portal, or the new portal. And then we had a new portal, which is the one that you're currently using. So that happens. From 2014 until 2018, we also saw Magnus magnifying. And with the curls, we were a little bit concerned that he would just want to mimic what Zachary was doing, nicknamed Curls back in the days. So, to the technical part. It's over. So the technologies we used in 2011 when we started building MyGet were basically Azure Traffic Manager for routing our DNS requests. Funny thing was, Traffic Manager has taken a really long time to go to general availability, and we've been using the preview version for years and years, and to be honest, this was the most stable product in Azure, or the most stable service in Azure at the time, so really good service. We used cloud services to host our stuff, so we had cloud services running the web application and the web API in a web role, and then a worker role doing some background processing, like indexing all the packages that are on your feed and making sure that you can actually consume them in your application. We used table storage and blob storage. Blob storage, of course, to store those packages, and table storage because back then we thought table storage is really nice and it's not SQL. Not SQL is a really good reason to choose for a technology. Not NoSQL, but not SQL. We also went with Azure ACS because we didn't want to build our own user registration and user identity system. We just wanted you to be able to click, sign in with your Windows Live account or your Google account or Facebook account and be done with it. We started on ASP.NET MVC version 2. And then WCF for all the OData endpoints for the NuGet protocol. Back then, we also used the Managed Extensibility Framework. Anyone still using that one today? Good. It did what it did, but it proved that it was too limited for what we were building over the years, so we replaced that afterwards, but I'll go into that one later. The technologies we used in 2018 when we sold the company, as you will see, they didn't really differ a lot from what we did in 2011. We went from tables, blobs to tables, blobs, and queues. We went from MVC2 to MVC5, and we went from ACS to the OWIN and ASP.NET identity providers that are in there. And we also went to AutoFac for our DI and IOC in the application. The reason we did this was that we were really very happy with cloud services, and actually still are, and it's still available, and it's basically containers avant la lettre. You would deploy your application in a machine that you know what the state of that machine is going to be. It's always going to be the exact same environment that you're deploying your application in. And we thought this works perfectly. Why change a winning thing or a thing that actually works very well? The only downside was that deployments would sometimes take 20 or 30 minutes, depending on availability of virtual machines in the data center. But it worked fine, and if 20 minutes really bothers you in a continuous automated deployment process, then maybe 20 minutes shouldn't matter. if you have proper processes and proper automation there. But it worked for us. Now, the main reason why we had this was that we wanted to be able to clone our entire code base from our repository, open up Visual Studio or open up whatever editor, and press F5 to run that thing. And that's what it still does today. The people who acquired us actually gave us a nice compliment about that as well, because their lead developer, he hasn't done .NET for a while. He just opened this thing, F5'd, and he could start playing with the features, playing with the code base, and seeing how this thing worked. So the F5 experience was important for us. We did not want to spend time with setting up database servers or whatever you need on your local machine to do something basically with the application. Now, Xavier and I, we were consultants at the time, so that meant that our application architecture internally, code-wise, was very layered. Of course, we had a data layer. Of course, we had a core thing where everything that didn't fit elsewhere went in. We had repositories on top of that thing. We had our services on top of that thing, and then our web application talking through those things. This proved very stable in the end, but it didn't prove very flexible. Building a feature would mean we have to add this thing in data, we have to add some helpers in core, we have to adjust the repositories or add something in there, build the UI on top, and so on. So we thought, okay, these layers, it's nice and theoretically nice, but it doesn't really allow us the flexibility of doing things quickly and getting things to the market more quickly. So in the end, this changed a lot, but this was what the code looked like in 2011. Our deployment back then was basically this. We had Azure Traffic Manager in front, basically routing the DNS requests to the correct endpoint in Azure. We did a deployment in EU West and one in North Central US. And those two had, of course, the network load balancer that cloud services comes with, and we had some web roles running the web application. We had ACS doing stuff and so on. And we thought this was awesome because all of a sudden, thanks to this cloud, we had a geographically distributed application. And if someone would ask for a deployment in another data center, we could just spin it up, point Traffic Manager at it, and people would go to the right location. Now, this had some downsides. We had some latency in the VMs in different data centers accessing the storage that we had in one location. If you have 20 queries to your table storage going over the transatlantic, making the transatlantic connection, then that's going to be slow. If you do querying and stuff, that's going to be slow. And the more users we got, the slower this became because there's just so much traffic going for a way too long distance. So we decided we had to refactor that a little bit. Also, the CDN was not stupid in itself, but stupid from us as a choice to go with a CDN for private feeds. Because a CDN, when does a CDN really get useful? Well, when people get the benefits of caching on the CDN. When someone downloads the thing and gets the performance hits, and then the next clients would get faster download because this edge node in the CDN has a cached version of whatever package you put on that CDN. Now with private feeds, this gets really interesting because those packages are private, and maybe if you have a team of 2 developers using those packages, those 2 people are probably going to get the performance hit on the CDN anyway because the cache would be expired after a while. So that was not the best decision. Also, it turned out that the CDN was not very reliable at the time. It's improved massively, but at the time we had downtimes with the CDN and we would have trouble, first of all, troubleshooting what's going on, what's happening here. And second of all, support on that thing was close to non-existent back in those days. So we thought, okay, it's a stupid decision anyway that we made this thing or chose for this thing. And it's broken every once in a while, so we want to get rid of it. So we went along and we did a lot of refactoring. And anyone have the Dell XPS as a laptop? You're familiar with the concept of the nostril cam if you have colleagues that have a Dell XPS laptop. So the webcam is below the screen, which means that images like this are really, really easy to make because the camera just points at you and you have these big hands. But in a meeting, it's just ridiculous. So whoever the designer is, I would like a word with you. Right. So our new deployment and our enterprise plan at the time was different. So instead of making 20 transatlantic calls from the US to our storage in the EU, we decided, okay, let's maybe put everything in Europe, everything that the website runs in Europe. And instead of making those 20 calls transatlantic, people would just go to the website and the website would make those calls locally and make everything happen locally, which was much faster. It's much faster to serve some HTML transatlantically instead of serving all those queries over the ocean. We did some other refactoring as well. So we moved to a multi-tenant model because of this enterprise plan that we had. So we had storage that contained our queues and our tenants. And then per tenant, we would have a storage account containing their feeds, their users, their privileges, their packages, and so on. The CDN was gone. We still used Windows Azure Traffic Manager. And you may notice that we also did a deployment in EU North with nothing deployed except some backups of the storage that we had. The reason for that is that we thought, okay, having 2 deployments in that close proximity is probably overkill and would cost us too much at this stage. But instead of doing that, let's maybe prepare a deployment in EU North and maybe let's prepare a deployment in some other data centers so that if EU West would have compute issues, we could simply spin up a new deployment in one of those other data center regions and Traffic Manager would fail over to there and people would still be using our services. We would, of course, incur some downtime because we would have to deploy in that other region, but the worst case, this was sort of our insurance policy in the architecture there. Now, you also see that we had some worker roles there doing stuff, and they were using the queues to do some background stuff. And we basically went with messaging in our architecture. So we rewrote a lot of the layered architecture to using commands and events that would go onto a queue. And you really cannot go wrong with messaging. We sort of put a ground rule in place in our code base where if you would do some action that would require more than one write into our data store, then it would have to be a command that could get executed out of band, and that would not be important to be real time. Those commands would then be picked up by a queue processor in those worker roles that we had, and every action would then complete with an I-event. So basically you would say, index this feed command, we would index that feed, and then once that finished, we would send another event on the queue, which was I index this feed event. Different handlers could subscribe to this I-command and I-event interfaces, and you could basically do a lot of things in there. So to give you a nice example, we built our auditing feature based on nothing but these events. So we had an auditing feature where we could see someone changed privileges, someone uploaded a package, someone deleted a package, things like that. Basically, what we did was we subscribed to every event that went on in our system, and our audit log would write that into a log file somewhere, and you could consult whatever happened chronologically in your tenant. So that was really a big benefit also of using this messaging-based approach. We use storage queues, so no service bus, no event grid, no whatever is underneath there. We use storage queues because at the time, service bus was very expensive for us. And we also thought, okay, we already have these storage accounts for tables and blobs. Let's use queues as well. We also did what every good developer does, and we wrote our own message bus on top of that thing. You build your own ORM, that's one thing you do, and you build your own message bus implementation. And in our case, that was called myget.auto because that was our message bus and our bus driver of that entire thing. I really like this GIF because it says, am I on drugs? And looking at the code of Auto, we often thought we must have been on drugs there, but it happens. And Dan loves messaging, so everything's good. If you would change a feed owner, for example, in the application, just to give you a little bit of background on how this would work, we would say, okay, the feed owner is changing. We would send a change feed owner command on that queue. Our backend workers would pick that up and they would change that thing. And they would also send an event that the feed owner changed. Then some other thing, our activity log handler or our audit log handler could pick up that event and do something with that as well. So while they were not really dependent on one another, they still could depend on one another, and that made it really easy to build certain features in the application. Right, we use table storage. Anyone using table storage in production? Anyone using it for more than just dumping stuff and really querying and building a proper thing on top? Good. You're probably familiar with the fact that table storage only has one real index, and that index is your partition key. Which means if you want to get a package by ID and by version and by package type, you're a bit out of options because you have only an index on one of those fields or a concatenation of those fields. If you would want to search a package based on a feed name and a package type and a package ID and a package version, that would get hairy very, very quickly. So we decided to make use of all the lookup keys that are available in Azure Table Storage, and one of those is your table name. We would create a table for every single feed that is created on MyGit. We would use the partition key, because that's the main index thing, and we would use the row key as well. So depending on the data type that we were storing, we were making use of those things. We also decided, since we already built our own message bus, we also decided, well, let's build our own SQL server, and we created a concept where you could define indexes on certain entities that we have, and those would duplicate the data as a JSON blob somewhere in table storage, but the partition key would change to whatever value you had in that index. So if we would make an index based on a lowercase email, we would create a partition key with a lowercase email address and then dump the JSON document in another property of a table entity in there. So we duplicated a lot of data, and in the end, this worked perfectly and worked really good. Now, at some point, and I decided to remove the slide because it's not really important, but at some point, Cosmos DB came about, and we were really interested in Cosmos DB, and we wanted to sort of do a lift and shift of our table storage towards Cosmos DB, which would mean that all of our feeds would all of a sudden become a container in Cosmos DB terms. And containers all back then needed 40 request units assigned to them. So for us, our cost of running this thing would go from $10 a month for all of our tables to $700,000 a month. So we decided, well, let's maybe not do that. We gave that as constructive feedback on some email aliases, and they decided to change that thing. So now in Cosmos DB, you can actually share request units across your entire database and not only per container. So that's a good thing. Still, we didn't migrate in the end, but that's a different story. Our multi-tenancy. You may have noticed that we went from using Managed Extensibility Framework to using AutoFac for our DI. And the main reason for that was that AutoFac allows you to create scopes for certain requests, for certain conditions that you have. So for our multi-tenancy, we decided, okay, for everything that we do in the application, we will pass around an iTenant context, which has one property, which is the current tenant. Your enterprise account would be a tenant. The public mygit.org would also be a tenant there. We would register it in the container with AutoFac, and we would say, okay, we have a request tenant context per request that comes in, and that request tenant context would simply look at the host name, look up the correct tenant entity, and specify it in there. So a really easy way of always having the correct tenants throughout the entire application anywhere you need it. So that worked pretty well. Right, another thing that we used was ACS. And anyone using ACS today? Anyone using AKS today? It's a different ACS. It's the access controls service and not the Azure Container Service or Azure Kubernetes service or whatever. So not the containers one. ACS, I don't know if anyone has used it. Okay, a couple of people, good. For us, it was very, very valuable because we would have one thing that we would configure in the entire application, and per tenant, we could specify host names and identity providers linked to them. So we could specify which host name could use which identity provider on the right side there. Access control service would do, figure out the realm there for us. It would also do claims transformations. So we had some customers who wanted to link their ADFS server and use that to log into MyGit. Well, we were able to configure that, but sometimes they had some weird claims coming back from the ADFS server, and ACS perfectly translated those claims into something that we could consume in the application. Although, after a while, we saw this blog post where they said all of a sudden, well, Access Control Service is going to retire in 1 month from now, but no worries. there is a migration guide that you can follow. So we followed that migration guide and we read through all those bullet points because that's what you do in a migration guide. You go through it step by step. And after all those steps, we discovered that unfortunately, there is not one service that offers all of these equivalent capabilities. So you're on your own, basically. That's what the message said. So we were like, damn, we have to do something else there. And we did. It was quite an effort to move to something else. And you may think that we went to a different service that does something similar, and you probably know which one that I'm aiming at. But we decided to, no, let's not go for a service this time. Let's do what every good developer does and build it ourselves again. And you may laugh with this, and we used to laugh at this as well, but our identity story was really a very core part of the product that we were building. And after building this thing and making sure that we could migrate every customer over to this new system and so on, we thought, okay, maybe instead of going with ACS in the beginning, we should have done this at the start of MyGit, because this is really critical. Identity is a critical part of our stuff. If a service goes down, people can no longer log in. If there's a data breach, it's in someone else's hands, and we want to own this thing. So not invented here. Usually we try to avoid it, but sometimes this is one of the things that you actually want to do, so we did that. The only thing we had was that the migration story took a really, really long time. Because what we did was we sort of built it in parallel, and we could migrate people over at any given point in time. But for the big customers, we required some action to happen. If you would have your own ADFS server, you would have to specify your ADFS server details and make some configuration changes in your own data center as well. So we decided, okay, let's email every one of our enterprise customers telling them what they have to change and by when they have to change this. Now, if you send an email, if you send a reminder, if you send a second reminder, and if you send a third reminder and a fourth over the course of 3 months, nothing happens. So it took a long time to get there, and most customers eventually migrated after 4 or 5 months from Service 1 to Service 2. And still some people didn't, so we decided, okay, let's just shut down the old thing and people will come to us with their configuration changes, which happens, which is not funny because you have to support them and they are raging because something's broken, but you cannot wait forever, especially not if the first service is going down within 1 month. So we did that. Right, back to business. A quick recap, we started in 2011. We added more features, tried to sell some stuff and added more features because we're developers and features. That's pretty much it. Unfortunately, if you add features and add more customers, you also get more support. We used email support in the beginning, then we switched to using Freshdesk for support. And this is a really nice report where over the course of 1.5 years, we did about 4,000 responses in the support system, which is crazy. And our average response time, 24/7, was 15 minutes. Does that mean we never slept? Of course we slept, but it just means that the periods that we were near our computer, we were just crazy fast at giving you an answer and making sure this happens. This was awesome because this was one of our strengths and people would appreciate us for doing this, and we would sell because we were very responsive and so on. But in the end, yeah, it started to become a lot. For 2 persons, doing 4,000 tickets in 1.5 years is crazy. So we started looking at the types of questions that came in. 20% approximately were billing questions. Also one of those things where you send out 20 reminders telling you that your credit card is going to expire. You take no action. Of course, the day that it expires, we try to bill you and your account gets shut down. Then we get a support request with hair on fire situations where people are angry and screaming at you because they ignored the previous 20 emails. But that happens, of course. About 20% were actual product questions, like I'm trying to do this, I have this scenario, how can I do this, and how does it work with your products? About 20%, so that's the support we really wanted to keep giving. 55% approximately was free consulting. Hey, I just started doing this NuGet thing, how can I upload packages to this thing, or how can I package something, or I have this multi-framework type of package that I want to create, how do I do this? So basically, we've been giving support that Microsoft should have been giving from the NuGet team. We've been doing that as well in our own support channels. And then 5% just pure random requests that didn't really fit any of the categories. So we thought, okay, if 55% of our time is spent in free consulting, maybe long-term we should make paid support plans. Pay us X amount of money every year and we will support you for those 55% of questions. But short-term, we wanted to reduce the workload a little bit, so we decided to outsource support. We talked to a couple of companies that do support outsourcing, and it turns out that it's really difficult to find a company that does NuGet, NPM, Maven, and all those other package management systems at the same time, so that didn't really work in the end. Some fun observations, by the way. We looked a lot at the data that we had, and the busy day for support is Tuesday. Monday is a really calm day. People don't seem to work on Mondays. Tuesday is when they start working in the week. That's what we saw. Sales questions would always come in on Thursday around 10 p.m. at night from Europe, from US, from Asia, from anywhere. They would come in at 10 p.m. at night on Thursday. Silly questions would come on Friday. I think a lot of people seem to have like a half day to just play along and do something in the company. Silly questions originating from that workload came on Friday afternoon. Also, after every big holiday, Thanksgiving and so on, we would see those silly questions, probably because people got drunk and forgot what they were doing before the holiday. Some other busy times, end of fiscal and so on, and we would get higher volumes in support there. Right, sales was going strong, and for the regular plans that was easy. People would just sign in and swipe their credit card basically and pay us. For enterprise, what we had was an email form, and you would get in touch with our sales department, which was me and Xavier again. You would talk to us, and we would go through a sales cycle and make sure that you could actually get an enterprise tenant set up and very enterprisey with a salesperson talking to you and stuff. We did not realize that a lot of requests would also come in for second opinions. People using Azure DevOps, ProGet, or any of our competitors, they would ask us as a second opinion, like, can you give us an offer? Can we trial this? Just for good form, because their company requires them to do this, but without any intent to actually make a purchase because the decision had already been made. So you spend some time in there. We also got crazy questionnaires. I don't know if anyone here runs a software as a service. Okay, a couple of people. You're probably familiar with questions like these. Typically, you get this huge Excel file or a huge Word document with 200 questions that are, describe your products. So that's basically go to our website and look at what it is, because we already described it there. What is your backup strategy? Can someone go into your data center and kick your servers or steal your servers? I don't know, we're in the cloud. I mean, I have no idea. Is there a formal policy around who can access the data? Who is responsible for these 50 roles in your organization? Which was really funny because it would always be the two of us. You're in the EU, do you do GDPR and stuff like that? Those interesting questions always seem to come up, and we decided, okay, we keep filling out all those different templates with always very similar questions. Let's maybe bite the bullet and go with one default template. So we did an exercise to take a lot of those questions, start crafting draft answers to them in our own documents, our IT policy, a privacy policy, responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities, and so on. But apparently, just sending those templates around doesn't really work. People really do want their company's template or their government's templates to be used there. So it worked. It made it easier for us to copy-paste, but you still have to go through those questionnaires. I mentioned responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities, and for those of you who were here last year at IglooConf, I did a talk about request throttling, and you may have seen this screenshot there. After we posted the responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities document on our website, we all of a sudden started to get automated scans trying to do SQL injection into our table storage. We got people trying to do session injection and trying to steal tokens and things like that. So a lot of people actually started doing that thing because we all of a sudden had a responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities. Just a document saying, if you want to target us, these are the rules to abide by, and we will play by these rules in answering and handling your requests. So just basically a deal with whoever wanted to do that, but apparently in the security community, there must be forums or something where those documents are shared, and people automatically assume that they want to, that you actually want a full pen test on the entire application. So we got a lot of emails like this from our enterprise forum. because that was a form sending an email asking for an enterprise plan. So we got over 600,000 emails in our inbox. Office 365 doesn't really like that, but in the end, we were able to remove those messages. Unfortunately, we also removed the one actual request that was in between there, and that customer was not really happy, but we fixed it in the end. So those vulnerability reports that came in, they are typically very, I must say, low quality. Typically the things like, after logging out, I can go to the logout page again and it acts as if it logs me out again. Like, that's not really a vulnerability. It's just a page that doesn't check for your token, just tries to log you out, and if not, happy path just redirects to the home page. After changing my email address, I should get a notification, okay? There's something to that. We decided to go into that and do that. But all those reports that we got in during that time seemed to also be shared on some dark web forums or whatever. So we got a lot of similar requests even after fixing those really small things that were in there. So we had a lot of triage work going on. We spent a lot of time triaging, like, is this still a bug? No, we fixed this 3 months ago. Like, why are people still reporting this thing? It's not a bug anymore. Also, a continuous stream of having to say no to people basically asking you for money for those vulnerabilities they found. Now, I must say there was one guy who did a really good job giving us a document of some things that he found, and we fixed those, and we asked that person, we basically hired him as a consultant to do a thorough check and figure out some other things. So it was kind of useful to do that. But in the end, it meant a lot of triage work and a lot of work going through all those reports that came in. At the same time that sales came in, those questionnaires came in, at the same time those vulnerability reports came in, at the same time support happened, and so on. At the same time, we still had ideas for the product as well. How do we improve the product? How do we add more features? How do we make sure that these new things that pop up in NuGet or in NPM are implemented in our actual products? So we decided, okay, let's try to reduce the support workload and improve our documentation, make better documentation so people can find the answer there instead of having to contact us. So we tried to hire technical writers. Apparently, I don't know what your experience is with this, and you may know, Saka, if you have hired people like this, but technical writers are really hard to find. First of all, the combination of NuGet, NPM, Maven, and so on is very difficult, but you can kind of work around that by finding someone who does one of those things. But it turns out that technical writers are really good at writing documentation on screenshots and whatever is there, like if you click here, the menu will open, things like that, and really good and really thorough in doing that, but not really the deep things that we wanted people to fix and people to look into. So we decided, okay, let's talk with our network. Let's see if we can find a good developer who doesn't mind writing. And we found a couple of those, but in the end, it always ended after a couple of weeks where the developer would get bored in writing documentation, even though it's kind of interesting because you have to go in there. But technical writers are really hard to find because good developers don't really want to write technical documentation, and good technical writers don't really want to develop. So that's a very tough role to find. So we decided to bite the bullet and work on something ourselves, and we did that. It never got to production because it was one of those typical 80% of the work was really fast and very enthusiastic, and then 20% was never finished. So we didn't really finish that in the end. More features. We thought, okay, we want more features. Let's maybe, if we still have to do the support, let's maybe see if we can find some interns or some other developers working for us and fixing those features and adding those features. So we decided to go to a local university, get 2 people from that university, students that could do an internship with us and churn out some work and some features for us. That also, unfortunately, didn't really work because mismatched expectations. We thought, okay, it's almost free labor of those students that we would get, awesome. But we also thought that they would have their PhD already and 20 years of experience in .NET and things like that. So that didn't really work out in the end. Although I must say it was kind of a fun experience to do because those 2 students in the end, of course, had to do something for their thesis and so on, and we helped them with that. But again, that was another distraction to the business that we were already running. And that's the thing that I'm going to next. We were busy. We were falling into a busy trap, doing support, doing this sales, doing everything except coding and building the company, basically. We were just doing things because things were coming in, very reactive and not really proactive. And at some point, I think we saw a tweet, that was this one. of a vending machine, and that really resonated with us. We thought, okay, that's exactly how we feel. The light is out, the passion is kind of gone, but we still work. That was what was happening there. So we decided it's time for change. This was one of the eye-openers that we had. We decided it's time for change. Are we doing this thing because we love doing this, or are we doing this thing because we are doing it? That distinction. We decided to think and discuss a little bit what the options were for us. Either we could stop bootstrapping, stop doing this next to our official job and go full-time on this. That was one of the options. We could keep bootstrapping and maybe hire a full-time employee that could work for us and build out the products. Or we could try to get acquired or at least talk to someone to maybe take over some parts of the product there. So we decided to stop bootstrapping. We had the passion. It was just because we had all these support requests, sales, and all that stuff coming in that we were doing busy stuff and we couldn't really build out the products. And we decided, okay, let's try to fix this. Let's stop bootstrapping, go full-time, and actually enjoy it again. So we thought to make it a lifestyle business, something that would just pay our wages, we could have fun with, customers would be happy, and so on. So we decided to figure out what the roadmap would be going forward, building out this company, making this company proper. We had some administration as well. Of course, we had to get paid by our own company, so all the administrative part there, but also all of the worst case scenarios. What if I fly to the US and the plane crashes? What happens to the company? What if we want to hire people and I want to hire someone from my family? Do we do that? Do we allow that or not? Like trying to figure out what could be potential sources of conflict around along the roads and try to fix them before they actually happen. So we did that and we decided, okay, let's go full-time, let's stop bootstrapping, let's make this happen, fireworks and everything. Yes, let's do this and we can do this. Except change is very, very hard in this situation. We were still very busy. We were doing the company, but we were also doing conferences, we were doing speaking exercises and so on. Xavier just moved into a new house and tried to get that set up, so all kinds of things that were keeping us busy next to even the second job that we already were doing. So our roadmap for change was a little bit on the back burner and we were still busy. We decided to go full-time start of 2018. Didn't happen. Even all of our roadmap was not yet discussed by the start of 2018. And in fact, I went through the pictures of IglooConf last year and you see this guy over there. Everyone was enjoying the conference. I was doing support last year. I was just busy making this stuff happen. But don't get depressed. We are awesome. It took longer than expected. Around February, March, we decided, okay, let's do this. And we talked through everything and we decided, okay, now is the time to do this. Approximately at the same time, we checked our spam folder and got an email like this, like a very short one, and it kind of looked like spam even. We are a venture equity firm and your business interests us. So we thought, okay, this is probably spam, should we delete this? But something said, okay, we were going for change, and even if this is spam, a reply is like the least we could do, let's just reply. So we did that, and eventually we got talking with them, and we were happy with them, they were happy with us, and there was a natural fit of the product in what they were doing, and we decided, okay, since we were planning to do something about this anyway, and maybe we are not the best persons to help MyGet thrive as a company, thrive as a product. Maybe we should just go with this and have them take it over and have MyGet grow underneath that other company. So we did, and we made some press with that and so on, and freedom. It's good that this session is a couple of months after the acquisition happens, because one of the questions that people would ask me, like, don't you have any regrets on selling the company or something like that? And I must say, no. More freedom for us to do what we like, more freedom to do, enjoy family and friends and so on. But also we're still on a couple of the email lists in MyGet. We still see support tickets and so on. And we can actually see MyGet is thriving under its new wings. So we are happy that this thing is now running by itself and running on its own and doing this thing. And that's just fantastic to see. Also, if any of you think about doing any software as a service or whatever that they want to do. Don't do what we did. We did a lot of reading in the past few months about businesses and stuff that's happening and so on. Read those things up front, and there's one that I would really recommend, and that's a book called Unscripted. Unscripted is about a guy who had some online shop, then sold it, then acquired it again, then sold it again, and now drives around in a Lamborghini, and now makes a ton of money probably of selling this book. But the book is really dense and compact in that it discusses a lot of concepts. And one of the concepts that I found really useful in thinking about potential future things that we could be doing is their sense approach that he has. Control, entry, need, time, and scale. If you have a business idea, you have to do the sense tests before you actually start doing this and work your business plan around the sense tests. Any one of you familiar with the business model canvas and that stuff? Very difficult to fill out, and I don't really like it. This is a very good thing to figure out if you should actually pursue your idea in the form that your idea has. Control. Do you actually own the entire ecosystem of the thing that you are building? Or could it be that because Amazon or Microsoft does a price change, all of a sudden you're out of business? Control. You want to have that control and be independent from that external change that may happen, or as independent as possible. Entry. How easy is it to start with this thing? If you want to do something that is web design, I don't know how many web designers are available on the internet, but the entry there is very low. The bar of entry is just, I can open Front Page or Visual Studio, or I can download the Bootstrap theme. I'm a web designer now. So the entry there is very easy. I'm not saying every web designer is like that, by the way, but the entry is just very easy. Whereas, for example, if you would want to do construction work, the entry is more difficult. You need employees for building, you need insurance, you need all those things, so the bar of entry is more difficult, which means if the entry is more difficult and you do it, you're probably gonna see less and less competitors in that space. Need. Is there actually a need? Are people going to use this, and are people willing to pay for this thing? Of course, that's a very important one. Time as well. Are you just converting minutes into dollars or euros? Or can you go on a weekend or go for a hike or go on holidays for 2 weeks and still make money because your product is still running? So can you decouple from time in what you're doing? And scale, can you do the same thing in Finland, in Sweden, in Belgium, in Netherlands, France, and so on? So a good test to see if you can actually scale that thing. Very good book covering all these things. But above all, love what you are doing. Whatever you do, love what you do. Even if it's your day-to-day job, it's fine. If you love what you do, keep doing it because it's awesome. But there's a saying that is very common, do what you love. I would not recommend doing that because we loved coding and we were doing all these other things together with the coding, and we sort of lost the passion, lost the fire in doing that thing. And yeah, I think we did a good thing with what we did. But above all, enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride, and if you have an idea, don't fear, just do it because it's actually kind of awesome as well. Thank you.